liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. We're going to start our meeting with citizen comments. This first part of citizen comments is for anything that is on the agenda. If you want to address the board at the end of the meeting, we have another opportunity for anything that is not on the agenda. Do we have any citizens that would like to address the board? Okay. Moving on to celebrations. Adam.
All right, well, I'll start with, I know this will come up later in the agenda, but I guess for my part, I want to just make sure to recognize Jeff West for his many years of service on the board and his longstanding and continued involvement in the schools and the community. He's done a lot more for the district and just served as a board member, as all of you do. But a person that's been an invaluable contributor in so many different ways over many, many years. And did a great job as a board member, and I just want to make sure to recognize and appreciate his service before we move on. That said, a couple stories that have been that are up on the website. The first is we have a student at the high school, Juliana, who was the winner of the Congressional Essay Contest. It's a competitive essay contest that students from around the country enter. One of her social studies teachers had spread that opportunity to the class, and she took her up on it and won. And so that'll result in a pretty cool summer experience in Washington, D.C., and maybe open up some networking and some other opportunities that come from that. So very nice job. It's a big topic. I think it was about First Amendment rights and the digital age and social media and all that stuff. So big topic. And her essay is posted up on the website if you're interested in taking a look at that. We had our 2022 Be Nice basketball game, girls game against Hazlitt. It's probably also one of the better, maybe the best basketball game I've seen all year. But and we beat them, which was great. But besides the point, I also want to just continue to reiterate, and I think Kennedy will touch on this a little bit later in her presentation, that the imperative for all of us as a community to be responsive and aware of student mental health needs this year in a general sense, perhaps more than any other year. Because I'll tell you, we're seeing it in the schools. And so Be Nice, I know a lot of times we kind of promote it as this, it is a club, it's a student organization, and we try to integrate it in some of these fun activities like basketball games or volleyball games and things like that to draw attention to it. But at the end of the day, it's probably one of the most significant things we have going, and it has the potential to save a student's life if we're able to identify or notice, to use the terminology from the program, risk factors or changes in behaviors or things that are going on in that student's life that might cause them to make some poor or unfortunate decisions, in some cases life-changing decisions. So I'll kind of get off my soapbox about that, but I just want to reiterate that this is one of many critical components, critical programs that we have in our district, and there's a lot of things that are going well, but there's also a lot of some students that really need that support, and this program is one of many different assets that we have to try to provide that support when needed. We also had the article about Ian Wade and her accomplishment, obviously National Board certification, and we obviously promoted that at our previous meeting. There's a lot of other really cool things going on in the district. I don't have all the stories up, and so at the next meeting I'll be able to kind of update you on those, but a lot going on with athletics, basketball playoffs, swim team, I think came in second to conference, had a great year. We had 7 wrestlers compete over the weekend at states, and I'll get into the results in that at our next meeting, because like I said, I don't have the story up yet. On the art side, we had another student selected from Young Creatives to have their artwork posted on a billboard in the Lansing area, and so that went out in one of my community updates. music, and we have a musical upcoming, but we also had students just compete in the jazz festival, and this coming Friday we have the evening of jazz with the auction. That's always kind of fun. Just don't bet on my car wash tickets; those are mine. And like I mentioned, playoffs for basketball. First Robotics competed their first competition this past weekend, and then they have their second competition coming up in 2 weeks at Mason. So really looking forward. I'll be able to get out to the one in Mason. I missed the one this past weekend, but really looking forward to seeing our new robot. And again, if you haven't seen a First Robotics competition, you really got to go check it out. I mean, it's like a sporting event. And I don't know, hopefully COVID's not damping it down, but if it's like a big sporting event, like times 3. Like they got cheering sections, and like everyone's in their school outfits, and just the things those kids can do with those robots is just amazing. So if you get a chance.
Is the robot, is that in Mason?
Yeah, the next one will be in Mason. I think it's the weekend leading into our spring break. So a lot potentially going on that weekend, but I won't get ahead of ourselves. But anyway, looking forward to that. The team has done a great job. So that is celebrations this evening, pending your questions.
A lot of exciting things going on. Next is our educational update, which I believe our presenter. It's always hard for me to see behind the podium. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And before Kennedy starts, I just want to, I'll just put this out that our social workers and counselors, they held the amount of work they've had to do this year, and I was kind of hinting at it earlier with some of the stuff about the Unites. They are taking on just monumental challenges, and the difference they're making in kids' lives is just profound. It's more than we'll see sitting here at these tables, but it's significant. And so, kudos to Kennedy and our other counselors and social workers for the impact they're having on kids' lives, both in and out of school this year. It's been a monumental challenge, and they've risen to the occasion every time. So with that, thanks for being here.
I also am going to add that I think I want to say kudos to our administrators and this board for making it a priority to get social workers back in our schools, because this is a shortage. Mental health is a huge thing right now, and I talk to more and more families who are trying to get their kids into therapy, and there's a waiting list, or someone's full, or they're not taking new clients, and it's just been really a struggle and a battle. So having someone in our buildings that kids can talk to, or at least try to make some connections is something that we're doing. So it's a struggle, so thank you. Okay, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, is this something I can use to direct this? Okay, perfect. I will make sure.
I see over my head.
That works. All right, well, I'm Kennedy Siemens. I'm the school social worker at Discovery Elementary. So I work with our preschool program as well. So I see the littles, 3-year-olds up to our second graders. So I'm working with them day in and day out. And so today I just kind of wanted to, this is kind of the presentation I gave at our district leadership presentation kind of meetings we do every month. And basically I'm just going to hit on our MTSS process, which is our multi-tiered system of supports system that we use in our schools. We use that at every building. That's just kind of our way to make sure we're hitting every student's needs, our building needs, the community needs at every level that we can. So that is what we are going to chat about today. So I want to jump in first with our current data that we have. So I kind of collected this based on conversations with the other social workers in the other buildings, kind of worked together to kind of narrow down what we're doing day in and day out. Again, this is the MTSS process focus, so we're going to be focusing more on the logistical kind of data-driven sides that we do, rather than more of the kind of day-to-day things that we're also doing. So we're going to jump in here with our general education numbers. So on the far left, we have Discovery Elementary, which is obviously my building, and these kinds of numbers, they're the same for all of our buildings that I focused on for the process. And so basically, our tiered system of supports works from a tier 1 level, which is the building-wide, kind of every student need that we're noticing. Tier 2 jumps into kind of needs we're seeing from some of our students, maybe groups, maybe classrooms, maybe a grade level, and then tier 3 would be that individualized support that we're providing. So tier 3 supports are these kinds of things that we'll be jumping in here about, and I'll explain those more. And then if you ever have questions at any time, please feel free to jump in. So our FBAs are our functional behavior assessments, and those are things that we kind of create, we modify, we work through, we assess based on an individual need. So this is a tier 3 intervention that we're doing here. And this need is something when we're working, we have maybe a student, especially at my level, we might have a student who is throwing chairs, they might be hurting other people, they might be hurting themselves, something that we're noticing some extreme behaviors. So this functional behavior assessment is aimed at connecting with that student through observations from myself or other colleagues that can help in that process, and really focusing on what the function of that behavior is. So we have a streamlined process that we use based on what the ISD uses as well and what the state of Michigan uses to kind of document through like antecedent, the behavior, and then the consequences of what we're seeing to really narrow down what the function is and why the student is working and engaging in that behavior. Whether it's attention, whether it's a physical need, they might be wanting to escape something that feels unsafe for them. Just kind of working through that. So it helps give us a better picture of what the students' needs are and how we can better meet them for those needs. And then we have our general education social groups, and those are things that all across the board we all do. And those are ways that we can meet a lot more kids. So maybe kids that aren't needing as much individual support, but they would still benefit from some type of support. So these are usually targeted toward 1 or 2 goals. So you might have a group with needing social skills intervention. So we might pull some second graders together and work on social skills work, or we might be doing emotional identification work, emotional regulation work, doing that. So for these buildings, I see 7 gen ed social groups. So I have about 26 to 30 students in those groups that I see. Those are every week. Explorer has 4 social groups. And then the middle school has 2 social groups, and the high school does not have social groups at the moment. And then we jump into our general education students. So these are students that we work through. We usually have a data collection process of 4 to 6 weeks of data from the teacher to kind of narrow down what tier 1 interventions they've done, so supports in the classroom and in the building that are working, are not working. And then we work to kind of narrow down what those supports are that the student is missing. So we kind of try to meet in the middle of what are some things that I can provide in my job to kind of help that student any more possibility of ways. So that might look like just one-on-one support, and it might just be once a week. It might be every other week. That could be 20 minutes. It could be 15 minutes of just kind of whether that's a check-in, whether that's kind of going through things that may be happening in the student's life that are really challenging for them. And then kind of just providing more of a targeted support than you would in a social group. So this is more just that one-on-one is the difference here with general ed students. And you have to go through permission slips for all of these too. So these are not things that we're just, willy-nilly choosing. These are all things that we're speaking with parents about, teachers about, making sure everyone's on the same page. So I see 6 general education students. I have a few more in the wings right now. And then in Explorer, they see 10, Colleen does, and then in the middle school, Lexi sees about 10 to 12 at the moment as well. And then in the high school, Kate Wilcox sees about 5 that she works with. And then we have the check-in, check-out students, and those are students that we meet with. We may start our day with them and end our day with them. We may do one or the other. Maybe a teacher does some, but we're usually in the mix somehow. And usually these are our students who kind of need just the extra reminder, that extra push as they start their day and end their day of what their jobs are in the classroom. So that may be having a safe body and having safe hands. That may be doing their job, working on their assignments, whatever that is. That may be listening to an adult or a teacher. It definitely varies, but this is another support that we offer to kind of help with just streamlining things to really support those students as best we can in the classroom. So I currently have 9 students that I meet with in the mornings and afternoons. And then Colleen has 15 at Explorer and 10 at the middle school. They have some help with their behavior coach there, which is really awesome. And then in the high school, they have 5 that Kate checks in with. And then Kate also has about 36 students that she follows in with throughout the month to just kind of check in if their students maybe just on her radar is just another touch point to have in connection there. And then we'll jump into the special education numbers. So these are the students that the beautiful part of our job is that we get to see both. So I can work with special education students and I can work with general education students. So the difference here is the process of identifying students, the formality of it, and the legality of it. So our special education students are those students that we are legally liable to see and make sure we see a certain amount of times per month based on their individual education placement or plan that we have for them. So these are the students that we have to meet case times with and session times with every single month. And these students we have specific goals with. So these are students that we work on an IEP team with the resource room teacher, their case manager, the speech language pathologist, their OT specialists, all sorts of that kind of stuff, to really just provide student support. And these students have specific needs, they have specific disabilities that they meet the criteria for this. And so I currently have 7 students that I meet with on caseload. Explorer has 19, middle school has 26, and the high school has 27. And these are very high numbers. So these numbers are, especially in the upper areas, much higher than typical. And same for me down below in Discovery, I have a lot more evals than are typical. So these are the evaluations to kind of see if a student meets the need for an IEP, and then meets the need for social work service as well. And same can be said for Colleen. She's also had a really high increase of evaluations that we've been doing this year, all sorts of those. And so we also I have one currently that I'm working on for social work evals. And then we have our special ed groups that I may work on as well. So these may be something that I do just because I have a really large number of kids that I'm working with, to make sure that I can get people through and get people seen and get their services met. Especially if they have similar needs, we might be putting them together in a group. And so they have 6 evals in the Explorer building, 7 in the middle school, and then Kate hasn't done an eval yet. Which is pretty typical for the high school. They kind of carry on the services from the other buildings, and so that's, Discovery and Explorer are kind of where we're finding those students for the first time, so that's why our eval numbers might be a little higher before they go on to the upper elementary and upper buildings as well.
Do you want us to hold our questions into the end?
No, absolutely, right now if you have
So are these special ed numbers, are total special ed kids in those buildings, or just special ed numbers that have social work on their IEPs?
Just social work, yeah. Yep, so these are just the students that are on my caseload that I see, whether that's direct service or consultative services. So these are just our building numbers. And then we'll jump into the 504s. So the thing that's unique about Discovery and Explorer is that myself and Colleen, we are also the 504 coordinators for our buildings. So a 504 is something that might be, it's a little different than an IEP. It's a little less formal, but it's still a document that we use that kind of goes through, we have different qualifications through the state that we use to kind of qualify students, whether they have a medical need that they may need a plan for, like an individualized plan, a student with diabetes or with asthma. A heart condition is very common as well that we may work with. And also students who just have maybe a medical or behavioral need that might coincide with an ADHD diagnosis or something of the like in that nature. So this is the process where we work with the physicians outside of our building, obviously, that they're seeing, that we get a diagnosis for, we can see a report for, we can then we do some observations, and then we kind of determine the student's academic need and how that disability or how that support or diagnosis is impacting their education. So this is where we kind of provide a specific individualized plan through a 504. These can be general education students or special education students. Typically, if it's a special education student, we move into an IEP rather than using a 504. But this is more often used for our general education students. So right here is where we're doing things like, the student may have preferential seating, or they may have someone to provide, an insulin dosage or something like that throughout their day, depending on if it's a behavioral or medical need. We also might put in check-in and check-out things in here in 504s and whatnot. So I currently have 2 current 504 evaluations that I'm working on. And then 2 504s that I currently have going as well in the building. And then Explorer, Colleen has 8, some medical, some mental health, and some weekly service 504s. And then she has some upcoming as well. And then the middle school has 18, and the high school has 31. So the difference is in the middle and high school, the counselors work on those. So that's Ann McKinney and then Linda Arab use those in the high school. And they provide support through those. And then this is where we're going to jump into our MTSS intervention processes. So does anyone have any questions about the first chunk of this?
I just have one. On the general ed, how are those students identified?
Okay,
so parents contact or teachers kind of nudge you, or how is that?
Pretty much both. It kind of depends on the student. It might be someone that we may see repeatedly in the hallway or something, and then check in with the student of, hey, like, what's going on? The thing about my building specifically is we have a walkie-talkie, and so I'm usually going in and out. Some days we'll have 20 calls that I'll be on, or some days we have 0. So those support calls can range from an hour long or 5 minutes. So it kind of depends on what the student's needs are, but those are when we have students who we're noticing are maybe having really big emotions in a classroom, or really just need a break, or they're having some sort of, they won't leave the classroom, those kinds of things. And so those are kind of other ways that we'll notice students who are really in need, especially in the beginning of the year. That helped us kind of find a lot of those kiddos who maybe were really struggling starting off with the system and the routine of things. But yeah, I'll jump into a little bit more in our process breakdown, but typically the student's teacher or parent will contact me or our principal or the teacher and let us know if they have some concerns, and then we'll kind of go through kind of what they're noticing at home, if it's impacting their ability at school, and then kind of collect data to see what we can do to help out.
Thank you.
And I can say, I know that in talking to the social worker at the high school, there is an outreach that goes to the parents. So if a student comes to them and asks for assistance, that they then will reach out to the parents to make sure that it's okay to speak with that student.
Definitely, yeah. So we might have a student who maybe doesn't usually have behavior issues, or maybe doesn't usually have really big needs, but then I've had a couple of these lately where they might just ask during the day, hey, can I go see Miss Kennedy? And I'll say, yep, and then they'll come talk with me, and then I'll follow up with parents to say kind of, hey, your student expressed some need today. Nothing, we need to do repeatedly, but just a FYI kind of stuff. But yeah, just to make sure everyone's understanding kind of what's going on and make sure they're all kind of aware of what's happening too. So this is kind of the paperwork process that we'll be jumping in here, kind of how we get to those numbers and how we get to those pieces. This is also a very lengthy and nuanced process, so if you have any questions at all about all of the acronyms and stuff in here, please do let me know as well. So this is our SAT process, or our problem-solving process, and these are kind of called different things at every building. So some of us call it the problem-solving, some of us call it SAT or BAT. Behavior academic team, student access or academic team as well. So this is where, in my building, we have a monthly meeting. So some of the buildings we may have, like the high school and middle school, only have one monthly meeting between team members, and those team members can bring concerns about students to the table, and then the team will assess whether or not they need to proceed with a social work evaluation or social work kind of support, or if they need to have academic support. Or kind of evaluations through school psychologists and whatnot, or more intervention in the classroom. So this is kind of that process where we can all meet together as a team to kind of get on the same basis of what supports the student is currently receiving, if they are, and then how we can continue to kind of add in or supplement those supports as needed as well. And Discovery and Explorer buildings, we have them 2 times a month or more based on the needs that we're seeing, because again, we're kind of that first process of identifying students in our district. So we do have quite an influx of teachers noticing more academic needs. They may not have, through preschool or young fives, and kind of going from there. But those are really the only differences between all of our buildings. So typically, it's just a very streamlined process. We always try to work from 4 to 6 weeks of data collection from teachers, whether that's from academic data collection of maybe the students' reading scores or math scores, or behavioral of maybe how many times they needed a break, or how many times they were kind of redirected in class and that kind of stuff. So again, these meetings can be students' academic or behavior needs being brought to the table, or both. Oftentimes it has been both lately. And then this team usually consists of, across all district buildings, our teacher, the MTSS coordinator, our social worker, the school psychologist, and then an administrator that attend these meetings to kind of offer a well-rounded wraparound approach. And then after 6 to 8 weeks of whatever intervention the team decides on, the team will meet again to evaluate the success of that, and then determine those next steps, which are either scaling back the services if the student was finding a lot of success, maybe adding more services, or moving to a special education eval. So this process really helps us kind of fine-tune that identification of students who maybe do have really in-depth academic needs or behavioral needs, instead of just kind of letting them fall through the cracks, or maybe just kind of putting up too much kind of support without having a really streamlined process to make sure it's data-driven and successful for the student. And so those are pretty much the only differences there, is the time that the students' teams meet here. And then we jump into the FBA and Behavioral Intervention Plan. So this is the acronym that I was talking about earlier, and this usually results from one of those problem-solving meetings. So this is where we start. We'll have a student be brought to the problem-solving meeting that may have quite a bit of data collection showing, hey, this is a problem. The things we've been working on have not been working out. The one thing to note is that this FBA and behavioral plan is only for students with behavioral needs. So this is one that's specifically only done from myself or the other social workers in the building. And so we always have to do our permissions, so we'll do either a contact or a meet with parents to kind of explain. Usually that's happened well before this because it's kind of a longer process, so they're not usually, unaware that this is happening or that this would be a next step. And then you do some observations once you have that permission piece. So then the social worker, or if they're able to, find someone else to kind of assist with that. We'll do observations. We try to do 2 to 3 in the classroom or in different environments to make sure we're getting a well-rounded picture of kind of where we're finding holes in what the student support is, what the student is receiving for support. And then we'll meet as a team to discuss the results of that functional behavior assessment. So again, this is where I will assess what the function of that behavior is serving the student, whether that's an escape tendency, whether that's an avoidance tendency, attention, or so on and so forth. And then we create a behavior plan. So that's what the BIP acronym is the Behavioral Intervention Plan. And the teacher really provides great insight here as well. So this is a really valuable tool as a full team to meet here because we can kind of brainstorm. A check-in, a check-out would be a really great option for this student, or a break needs to be happening right before lunch when the student may really be struggling, or right after lunch when they're trying to kind of return back to the classroom routine, or maybe after or before a gym class and that kind of thing. And then we might put in social work support. We might be putting in something there of like, hey, they'll attend a social group to kind of address this need as well. And this looks at the whole building. So this is never just in the classroom. This is stuff that we're working in the lunchroom, at recess, at art classes, or related arts classes. Any of those kinds of scenarios, maybe arrival, dismissal, things we can do to really assist all across the board. And then once that behavior plan is created and the materials associated with that, we'll hold a team meeting, which is typically with the parents. We like to have the parents there. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but that's the goal. And we work there to discuss the overall results and then the implementation of the behavior intervention plan. So that is pretty much where we update on everybody, what we're going to do, what the plan is, and then go through the data of what the data was showing. And then we'll implement that behavior plan for 6 to 8 weeks with fidelity to make sure that we are evaluating for results that are comprehensive. And then we'll plan for next steps. So this is where we hope after 6 to 8 weeks that maybe we could scale back, but then it also is a really great tool to inform us if we need to add more services there as well. Any questions on any of that? I know that's a lot of information. Okay, and then we'll jump into some wins here, because I think that's important to mention too, is we have in Discovery, our first FBA we did this year has been successful. That student will likely have the behavior plan for the rest of the year based on their needs, and so we just kind of work to, it's a living document. We can always update it if needed, but it's been really successful there. And then I have a few that I'm hoping will be the same. In Explorer, we have one doing really well as well in the data collection stage. And then the middle school, they had a really successful one that they've done. And then in the high school, they had one as well. That was really successful. After 6 weeks of intervention, they were able to, wean off those supports and services and didn't need to pursue that anymore, which is awesome. That's always the goal there. And then now we'll jump back into, this is the last part of the presentation. This is just the breakdown of those tiered supports that I spoke about earlier from our MTSS process. So again, tier 1 is those strategies for all students that are explicitly taught, modeled, and practiced. So one of those things that I didn't include in here is our SEL kind of curriculum that we are kind of using. And just like Dr. Spina said, of Be Nice is one of those things that would be considered a tier 1 approach in the middle and high school programs, is using that to really kind of provide extra layers of supports to those students. In the lower elementary buildings, the second step provides this as well. And so that's something that just creates a common language, a common kind of touch point for students and teachers to use together to work through things, which is really awesome. And then encouraging and providing break opportunities, using maybe calming and mindfulness practices that are built into classroom routines and structures, a reward kind of reinforcement system that these kinds of things, especially I know from experience that most of our teachers in our district do an exceptional job at. So these are just really promoting regulation and kind of just help for these students, support for these students in so many different ways in the classroom that's just built into their classroom culture. So those calming and mindfulness practices may look like maybe doing some stretches every morning together as a class, or it might be having a calming corner where students know that they're able to go, especially in our lower buildings, if they really just need to have a moment to just kind of reset or rest a little bit. And then, those reward and reinforcer systems are really just basic classroom management kind of techniques. So that would look maybe like every time you get, you're doing your job as a class, we get a star in this thing, or, and then we work toward a pajama day, or maybe you work toward group work on a test or something like that in the upper buildings. Maybe getting to have a special seating day, those kinds of things. Posted daily schedules, that's an intervention because that helps the student really know what to expect throughout the day. Class contracts and class pledges and agreements are really great things too, tools to use that help establish those class values and expectations among all the students and the teacher, and are really integral in including students in that process. That's a really huge thing, especially in those upper age classrooms, is really encouraging and providing students with opportunities to have a voice in the classroom, whether that's in processes, whether that's in how they kind of speak or relate to the teacher, any of those kinds of things, personal greetings especially. That's something that can be kind of gone over and not really seen as this really crucial thing, but studies show that personalized greetings to students, just saying their name every time they come in the classroom, can be super huge in providing just really support and involvement and encouragement integrated into the classroom culture as well. Then we'll jump into our Tier 2 approach. So these are those strategies for some students when our Tier 1 supports are not adequate. So these again are those social groups, and so those are things that we may work on: friendship skills, emotional recognition, regulation skills, and these are things that I think are completely, unprecedented as well, that we're noticing in our general education students this year. Is just to echo too, is just such a huge need on so many fronts of mental health in our buildings, and so many more students with, separation type needs that they're noticing based on maybe separating from their teacher. If a teacher is absent for that day, one student may have a really challenging time even being in the building. And just really using these kinds of things to just grab as many kids as we can in this process and really provide a large amount of support, because it is just so desperately apparent this year. And then we have that check-in, check-out system as well that's just really helping to provide a touch point for a safe adult in the building. So this is another very much used intervention as well. And that can also be used for a positive peer to help promote social skills as well. We have those behavior tracking goal sheets. I think we have minimum of one of these in every single classroom this year. We have students who really just benefit from this type of intervention and support, and this has been a great tool to use for communication with parents as well, and a great data tracking piece. Posted personal schedules may help for a student if they have specific kinds of things that they go about in their day for close proximity as well. So they're not reinventing the wheel. These are all kind of interventions that we can use that are just doable for the teachers and just really helpful for the students in any way possible. And that brings us to our Tier 3, which is for those few students when Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports are not adequate anymore. So this is where we'll see social work support, or that FBA and behavior plan development, 504 evaluation, special education evaluation, maybe some alternative settings. They may go with an adult at a different time of the day if they need to, may have lunch outside of the classroom if the lunchroom is too overstimulating for them. They might sit outside of the lunchroom, and have a separate table, something like that for whatever benefits them. And then that social work support is always coming from that general education consent form, special education evaluation only when the data supports it, and then teaching, which is where we kind of have those social skills groups and those one-on-one supports as well. So that is the remainder of my presentation. This quote just was really helpful to me, I think, especially after coming in after a pandemic and during a pandemic, to kind of inform that we are always needing to change the way that we're communicating and working with our students to help be successful for them. So I know that was a lot. So does anyone have any questions about any of that?
It's great.
Thank you, Kennedy.
It's very thorough.
Yeah, thank you.
Very informative. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Do we have are there any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the
That's
opportunity.
great.
Just to kind of close up on the ed update too, I think we've mentioned this in previous meetings, but the district leadership team is really continuing to focus this year on student mental health and how we're addressing that. And so there's a book study that deals with student trauma. The leadership team works through systematically. I think we're down to our last 3 chapters now that we're going to move through. And then obviously the last meeting is going to be about, well, how do we go in and systematize that through all the buildings, although most of the buildings have actually taken that and run with it because it's our second time through the book, first and a half. We got cut short the first year we were working through it. And then the social workers also do presentations as part of those district leadership team meetings on a variety of student support subjects, although the one that's coming up, I believe, is going to be more on staff mental health and how we're addressing them as they try to attend to the needs of, well, so many needs, as you've heard tonight, of our students. So it's a really great work by all involved, but there is an exceptionally large need that we're trying to address as well.
Thank you. I do want to backtrack for 1 minute. Amanda's gone, and I did talk to Julie. She will be our acting secretary for this evening, secretary on record. I just didn't make that announcement. So Julie will be our secretary tonight. Okay, moving right along. Superintendent report.
So Dr. Cook's got a couple quick updates on our NWEA meeting from her previous presentation, as well as answers to some board requests that came after that presentation had ended. So I'll turn it over to her.
Good. Well, tonight I'm here because I'm correcting and clarifying an error that I had in the NWA data that I presented last month. And actually, in reviewing the data that Dr. Lewis had requested, he had a question of why the 8th grade data might look lower than in the past years. And so I always like to follow up, and it kind of hit me, why is that? And so I realized that I had switched the column headings, not the data. So the data was correct, but in doing it, I had switched the columns. So when you saw what the norm RIT score was from NWEA, that was actually, which was higher, that's a positive, that was actually our data. And the other column, I don't know if you have it, if you would like to pull it up. It's easier to show you, I think, on the screen if you do.
It would have been from
Oh,
last
I thought
week.
I sent it, did
It's
I
on
not?
here.
Yeah, it should be sent.
Oh,
Yep, there it
There
is.
it is.
So now, the columns that are highlighted, those are our columns, those are our new scores, or the original scores, and then the mean RIT is now what NWE says is our standard, what we're looking for. The good news that I will share is with the corrected headings and the data, we are higher in all grades than the norm RIT. So I wanted to express my apologies. First, I was very surprised, but thank you, Dr. Lewis, for bringing that to my attention, because I wouldn't have known, and we would have seen a bigger jump, obviously, in the spring, but we want accurate data. So thank you. And then I think if you scroll down, I believe that I included this. Additionally, Mrs. Conley asked to look at our scores compared to other Ingham County districts. So I was able to gather that, and the aggregate average RIT score, it's for the districts that use NWEA in Ingham, because not all do. So Hazlitt, Holt, Mason, Stockbridge, Waverly, Weberville, and ourselves. We could only compare it for grades 5 through 8 because some of these districts don't use it for 2 through 4, so it was hard to do. But as you can see, we were also above the county norm RIT for grades 5 through 8. So I'm pleased to share that with you. Thank you for asking that. It's nice to see. I love actually looking and digging into it myself. So
With a new system, it'll give us some.
exactly, because this is really only our second full year of using NWEA. We had that break due to COVID. So it's going to be really nice now to be able to track everything. So thank you for asking those great questions, because it really helps guide it. Any questions for me? All right.
Thank you for
so
coming
much.
You are
back.
so
for coming
welcome.
back.
All right, then I'll move into just a recap of our professional development half-day, which was last Friday. We had a PD day back in February that got snowed out along with school that day, so many of the agendas were pushed over to last Friday. And I'll just hit some of the highlights. Discovery continued to work on their social emotional learning, or SEL, plan. That's board goal 1. They also spent time working through and discussing their English language arts pilot program. That's something that'll come to the board later this year as the pilot for their English language arts program continues, and that's also connected to board goal 1. Explore reviewed aspects of their school safety protocol, which is aligned with board goal 4, and also dug into, ironically, some of their NWEA data analysis, also connected to board goal 1. The middle school spent a considerable amount of time looking at social emotional learning as well as mindfulness practices, and also their CHAMP system, which stands for Conversation Help, Activity, Movement, Participation, and Success, and that's the structure within their positive behavior intervention and supports plan that really focuses on student behavior and working through those processes. And then the high school finalized their non-achievement rubric, which is connected to board goal number 5. There'll be a parent communication going out about that here in the next week or two from Dr. Delp. And what they're going to do is pilot that rubric throughout the second semester and obviously gain feedback on things that worked well and worked in it. But it has been fully designed and proofed and approved by the staff, and so they're ready to take that next step as far as a pilot of it over the course of the remainder of this semester. And that's, like I said, aligned to board goal 5. And then they also spent a considerable amount of time on department level work, and actually my highlight, other than lunch, the highlight of the PD day was actually walking in and seeing the math department at the high school. One of our research bases is John Hattie's work on effect size and instructional practices that promote the greatest amount of effect size in our instruction. And the math team had their Hattie books out. They had 5 Hattie books out, all highlighted and tabbed, and going through there and really talking about effective math instruction. And so that was just an awesome way to, for me anyway, to kind of wrap up the day, seeing those conversations take place, and the team did an excellent job. So that is a recap of our PD day on Friday, half day. Any questions I can address there? And then the last point is upcoming discussion and presentation items. So on the 21st, which is your next meeting, Sarah will be presenting the 21-22 budget amendment. And then after spring break, our meeting in April, we'll receive an update from Paige Polson on athletics and enrichment. And you'll also see our teacher tenure recommendations from respective building principals.
Any questions for Adam? All right, moving right along. Board committee reports, ISOA, Sarah.
This was just the meeting minutes from the February meeting that Jeff and I reported out at the last meeting. And our next board meeting, we will see the meeting minutes from last Wednesday's meeting. So I'll wait to talk about it. The minutes didn't get out in time before board book, so I'll wait
Okay.
to report on that at the next meeting.
All right, and then policy.
We had a policy meeting on February 16th. Many of those policies you will see come before you. Some look like they are stricken, but really they're merged with other policies that we already have. One thing I do want to note that we had a board member request that we look at policy 8260 and 8260R, which is our bullying policy. The committee reviewed what we currently have on the books and what other districts have, also Michigan Department of Ed, their model policy. And we did not, we determined that our policy was in line with those, and so we do not have any additional changes or updates to be made to that policy.
Okay.
And that is all.
And these are up for discussion tonight. Correct.
With the exception of the bullying policy,
Bullying
there were no
policy.
changes, yes.
Okay. All right, Do we have any questions about any of the board reports? Okay, I'm going to move on to discussion items. This is a proposal for a District 101 initiative for grades 6 through 12.
All right, well, James Doyen, our Supervisor of Technology, and I will be presenting the concept for you this evening, and I'll start off with the first third to half of the presentation, and I'll let James take the part that involves all the financial components and all the numbers. So I'm gonna just kind of, here's our agenda for the presentation. And bottom line up front with this, what we're proposing is in the fall of 22, so next fall, beginning of next school year, that every secondary student in the district be provided with a district provided Chromebook that they can utilize both at home and at school. So there's a number of pieces of rationale that I want to cover, and I want to kind of back up. Pre-COVID, we were one of 4 districts selected by Michigan Virtual University, or MVU, to participate in 4 years of professional development on how to effectively implement blended learning. And so this is a concept, and I'm going to kind of shortchange it here just for brevity's sake. But it's the idea of how you utilize technology as a vehicle to enhance your curriculum and your instruction. It's not a standalone thing, it's a tool, right? It's a tool to enhance your instruction. And we had that integrated throughout the district. We had a number of early adopters that really pushed the envelope forward and supported other teachers in terms of adopting those practices. One of the things that we did at that time where we created the new positions in each building called blended learning coaches, and this is part of our contract now, where we have these experts in the building that assist other teachers with implementing blended learning practices. And so they're kind of like the go-to people when you need ideas or supports for implementing those in your lessons in your classroom. We also, of course, after all that had occurred, then came COVID. And that sped up the timeline for a lot of things. And one of the, I guess if there's a glass is half full aspect to COVID, it's that in our roadmap to adapt blended learning practices, that got accelerated by necessity. Probably we jumped 3, 4, 5 years ahead in the course of 1 year. And so what that's led us to is this expectation and knowledge base, right? We have parents and students and staff who have this expectation that they want to utilize the knowledge base they've gained over the last 2 years and the way they've utilized blended learning to enhance their instruction and their curriculum. Moving forward to this year, we've seen that we don't always have the ability, because of lack of access to devices, to continue that pace and momentum moving forward. So part of the rationale for this initiative is to take advantage of the lessons learned and the capabilities that were discovered over the last 2 years, but also build on that strong foundation of blended learning philosophy that we had even in the years preceding the pandemic. One piece I'll touch on the next slide is that based on our survey of ESSER fund utilization back in November, enhancing technology and access throughout the district was something that was strongly supported as a result of that survey. And then obviously the big piece that we needed to have in place, which we believe now is, were the financial resources in order to move forward on this. And so that's the part that James will cover it in more detail, referencing the 2 different funding sources. The 2 grant, well, one's a grant, one's from as a result of the ESSER funds, and then the remaining costs will be covered through, potentially through operating dollars, general operating dollars. All right, so you'll probably be able to see it a little more clearly in your packet or on your devices, but these are the results of this community survey back from November, in which we had polled stakeholders on what they thought the best use of ESSER dollars might be. You can see technology, integration was very popular. Ironically, just below it was HVAC upgrades, and that's also on your agenda tonight. And some of the remaining 3 items are going to be addressed later on this spring in terms of how we're going to use ESSER $3 when they eventually become available. That's a whole nother story. So that's kind of an overview, big picture, and a little bit of background about how we got to this point. And I'll let James cover the specifics in terms of how we're going to look to fund this, not only next year, but over the next 10 years.
Sounds good. All right, so let's see the slide here. So the Emergency Connectivity Fund. So for those that aren't familiar, it's a $7.17 billion program funded by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. The goal of the Emergency Connectivity Fund was to ensure that all students can participate in remote learning, and by providing school districts with funding to purchase devices for students based upon their established criteria. So over this past summer, I submitted an application for our district to request devices for all of our eligible students in the district, Chromebooks and hotspots. The application back in November was approved by USAC. We received confirmation. And so we're set to receive 430 student Chromebooks pending board approval. The dollar amount for the Chromebook purchase is over the board threshold, so it does require approval. However, the hotspots have already been purchased. The keynote about these devices is that they must go home with the student. However, they are allowed to bring the devices with them to school to use during class time. So. Okay. Okay, so with us being set to receive the number of ECF devices we're being set to receive, we're 62 devices short at the secondary level from having enough devices to switch to one-to-one. So that, with that in mind, what better way to ensure that our secondary students can continue to learn while at home than to give each of them a Chromebook. So that's why we're planning to purchase 122 Chromebooks using ARP ESSER 3 funds to move forward with the initiative. So with the additional 122 devices, that's of course 60 above the bare minimum. The thought is that this will allow us to have one cart of extra Chromebooks at the high school and at the middle school to allow for students that forget their device at home. It's not charged, they don't have a charger, device breaks, needs to be swapped out, so that way they could keep using the device throughout the day if they need one. And then also, of course, if we have an increase in enrollment and we need more devices. So that gives us a little bit of a buffer in the event that we need to have additional devices. So.
Do you need to wait until the end and ask questions, or would you like me to do it?
Oh yeah, no, feel free. Yeah, feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm open to questions. Yeah.
So when we're saying, are they going to just send us 430 Chromebooks, or are they going to send us a check and we get to buy what we want?
So the way the application was submitted, we requested that the vendor invoices USAC, and then we'll just receive the devices. So we don't actually have to provide the money to the vendor. The vendor will be reimbursed by USAC directly. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, if a student, now this would be one-to-one for every student, but if a student has their own device and they don't want to use a provided computer, do they still have to use it because of whatever they needed for their class? Or if they have their own computer and they're bringing it to their class, can they continue to use their own device?
That's a good question. So for Google devices, there are many settings that are associated with the user profile. And so if the student signs in into their user profile on a personal device, they should be able to get much of those settings. There may be certain situations where they might run into some roadblocks without using a school-issued device. I know that students have been allowed to use personal devices in the buildings. And so I think that we would offer a device to every student, and I don't think, well, I guess one key thing that would require a district device to work in the building is LAN School. So that's the software that our teachers use to monitor students while they're in the classroom. LAN School will only work on a district-issued device. So if a student has a personal device in the classroom, they may still be able to do their schoolwork, but the teacher wouldn't be able to monitor them. And so that's one thing that could be a roadblock. I think that, I like the idea of allowing students to use their personal devices if they have a better device than the one the school is willing to provide. But there would be some specific things that we would have to kind of work through if we were to allow that.
Is that something that you and possibly administrators can work out?
Yeah, I think at this point, the intent is to provide every student a device. Now, if they want to bring their own as well, but I think in order for this to work more smoothly, using the common instructional resources that we have, they're going to most likely want to use, at least while they're in school, a district device. And there's a bunch of other reasons for that as well, potentially, but that's kind of the idea that we're looking at this point.
Yeah, I guess the other layer too is security. You know,
Right.
with the district issued devices, they're connected to our network. We have control over everything that's on them. Student brings in a personal device from home. It's great that they have the ability to use it, but it's less secure than using a district device. So that's another thing. So another trade-off. So, and did you have any questions about the previous slide? I know I kind of went through that one about the ECF program. If you have questions about that one.
You might get into this, but what's the lifespan of these Chromebooks?
The Chromebooks, I will get into that, but it's a maximum of 5 years after the manufacture date. It might be a little bit more or less, depending on the specific model, but in general, it's 5 years. I will touch on that some more later, but the key reason why is that once the devices no longer receive updates, they no longer can be used for testing. The testing platforms require that students have the most up-to-date version of the testing program, and so that also requires the latest updates on the Chromebooks themselves. And so for us to use the devices to test, we would have to maintain the 5-year replacement plan, which is something that we hope to establish.
That's another reason why we wanted to bring the district-issued devices.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so go ahead and move forward here. Okay, so here's a timeline of what needs to happen between now and the upcoming fall when students will ultimately get the devices. The first thing is, assuming that the board is in favor of moving forward with the initiative, first thing we would do is, once the board approves it, the purchase of the ECF devices, those are ready to go. We would just submit our purchase for those, and that process is already ready to go. And then once they arrive, we begin getting them ready to be distributed. Unboxing them all, getting them all enrolled into our management software, assigning an asset ID, et cetera, getting everything ready to go so that way the devices can be given to students. The next key date there is middle of April. That's when REMC, the device purchasing window, opens. So REMC, that's the organization that we purchase we make much of our large purchases through. It's a state-run program that many districts throughout the state of Michigan are involved in. The organization, they actually do bidding to get the lowest prices for schools. So we save a lot of money by purchasing devices through REMC, and they are bid upon. So once that purchasing window opens, we would go ahead and purchase all of the remaining Chromebooks that we would need to move forward with the initiative. So 266 of which would be to replace Chromebooks that we currently have but need to be replaced. 122 would be the additional devices we needed to get us up to have the 2 extra carts, one for the middle school, one for the high school. And then there's 30 in there for Explorer. Explorer want to transition away from having Windows desktop computers to having an additional Chromebook cart. They find the Chromebooks to be more useful than the computer lab. Next item there is, so the beginning of May, we want to begin looking for some additional staff to help with the additional demands of the upcoming summer projects, as far as some of the things that aren't covered here. So we're hoping to move forward with the one-to-one initiative, which would require us to get somewhere about 900 Chromebooks, I think, in total. We'd be, pulling, I think, about 600 devices that are currently installed in carts and classrooms, setting some of them aside to be recycled, the new ones, getting them all configured. We're also hoping to get some new document cameras for teachers, some new desktop computers. We do that every summer. Chromebook cases. So lots of things we're hoping to get done this summer with the money that we're going to be getting from ESSER, and then also the ECF, and hopefully we'll be able to get all of that stuff done with the additional help. So May 18th, so that's roughly when I'd like to begin the onboarding process for a inventory management software. So one of the key challenges with distributing devices to students is keeping track of everything, keeping track of who gets what device, when they return it, whether or not they returned it with the charger, et cetera, et cetera. It's an ongoing battle, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that keeping everything digital is going to be crucial. And the way that we're going to do that is by getting a PowerSchool plugin to keep track of device check-ins and check-outs. It'll allow us to enter all the information about the devices in there, keep track of repairs, how much it costed, who got which device. We won't have to delete anything. Everything will be there, and unless somebody deletes it, the database gets backed up, so we'll be good even if somebody deletes it. So having that plugin will make life a lot easier for everybody, and it'll make the checkout process much quicker, and then also if we have any questions about who has what, it'll be easy to answer it. It'll all be digital, so looking forward to that. And then June, so June 13th is the first day of summer break, so that's when rubber meets the road. That's when we would start with all of the big summer projects we have, and then, for this presentation, the one-to-one initiative. So that's when we would start removing devices that need to be prepared for distribution, setting devices aside that need to be recycled, and then reconfiguring the new devices that we receive to replace those devices and redeploying them in the locations they need to go, or setting them aside for students to pick up when they return in the fall. So August 15th, we don't know when the first day of school is going to be, but that's roughly when, a couple weeks before school starts, we're hoping to have the devices ready to go, and students can then pick up the Chromebooks when they're picking up their books, their other materials for school. So yeah, that's the general overview of what needs to happen between now and then if we decide to move forward with the initiative.
I want to reiterate just the opening part of this. One of the reasons why we're coming to the board tonight is so that you could potentially vote on the concept at the meeting on the 21st. What that allowed James to do is when the REMC pricing opens up in April, he can go right now if you've approved it, right? So we know that just like everything else right now in the world, it's hard getting things. And so the best shot we'll have at getting the devices we'll need to be able to execute this in August is if he can order immediately when that window opens up in April. So that's kind of the rationale for why the timeline looks the way it does at this point.
That's a great point.
And how many people are you looking to hire to help with this? Is it just one person or two, or?
So we want to have one full additional staff person for our department who would focus on Chromebook repairs, and then have 3 summer student helper type staff persons that would just be there for the duration of the work that would need to be done over the summer. We wouldn't say that we're going to pay them indefinitely over the summer. We would say, okay, this is what we're looking at, and once there's no work left, then we're done. So it's just going to be on as-need basis.
Oh, and when we're looking at checking, so the idea of this is kids are gonna pick their Chromebook up on day one and then keep it for the year and check it back in the last day of school, or will they keep it, like, if they don't have any problem
Right.
with it, and I'm a freshman, I'm gonna pick it up and keep it for the 4 years that I'm in school
Yep.
and turn it in my last day of my senior year?
Yep. Yeah, I would like for students to keep their devices unless there's a need for them to return them. Some students will have to return them because the devices are no longer going to be supported. So we will distribute devices that will have to be replaced between the time that they get them and the time that they graduate, depending on which grade level they're in.
Yeah.
And so those students will have to return their devices to get a new device, so that way we ensure it's being updated. And then, seniors, when they graduate, we'll have to get those devices from them and then pass those on to sixth graders. So we'll kind of do this revolving door of when the devices need to be replaced, and then also when students leave, we'll cycle the devices around. But I don't think currently that it's necessary to collect all of the devices back every single summer. And I think that unless there's a compelling reason to do so, we can save a lot of unneeded work collecting them back and then redistributing them. So
So the idea is keep.
Yep.
Nice. Exciting.
All right.
I had a question in reference to that. Well, you haven't really gotten to the budget yet, so are you done? Are you gonna go to the budget area? You're still on the timeline.
Okay.
I've been going fast forward a little bit, James.
Oh, that's
my
all right.
fault.
Yeah, no worries. I'll go ahead and move over here to the next slide. So, okay, so this is the first slide that gives us a breakdown of costs. So this one, this here is a breakdown of what we would expect over the next 10 years if nothing changed. So the only thing that would change is we move to replacing devices on a 5-year schedule. So we're not increasing the total number of devices. We're not giving devices to students to take home. The devices that we have, we keep, and we maintain a 5-year replacement program on those devices. So that's what this cost breakdown reflects. So I got some key points here. So I've already touched upon why we do need to replace devices every 5 years. It's because every 5 years devices lose software updates, and when that happens, they can no longer be used to test. One thing I wanted to point out is the total estimated annual upkeep cost. So the per device number for that one is $1.14. And what I did was I combined the average annual cost of the years leading up to COVID. I didn't include COVID because that was when students had devices at home. And then I figured out how much it was per device. And then each year I increased the $1.14 upkeep cost by 2.4%. So that's why the numbers gradually grow over time. We would expect that, over time, pretty much the prices of everything go up. So, yeah. In the total replacement cost column, so that's the cost of replacing the devices that we currently have in our fleet. And then the new device purchase cost is for devices that we would add to our fleet. So the cost per device for this projection for Chromebooks was $250, and that increased by 2.4% a year. So if you take the 164 and multiply it by 250, that should be the total there. The 67,500 there at the end, so that would be the cost to purchase the ECF devices. Now, that's why it's highlighted in blue. So the values that you see here that are highlighted in blue, these are all going to be purchases that will be covered by ECF and ESSER funding. So those are dollar amounts that the district should be reimbursed for, or may not have to pay at all, depending on how the arrangement was set up.
I was hit on the highlight with that, we have to purchase those. I mean, it's still gotta go to the board because it breaks the threshold, but like, the grant, we already awarded the grant, so like, we can't use it for anything else.
Yep.
Yeah, we were able to use it for hotspots and Chromebooks, the hotspots are already distributed and bought. We gotta buy those, so yeah, whether you approve the concept or not, we gotta buy at least that value of Chromebooks just to fulfill the obligations of the grant. So I think we're good to move on to the
Yep.
the
Okay.
next one there, James.
Sounds good. Yep, and the grand totals are at the bottom right corner. The next one here. So this is much of the same, except this is the estimated costs if we were to go one-to-one, specifically for Chromebooks. So, and this is at the secondary level too. This isn't the entire fleet of Chromebooks, it's specifically the secondary level, because that's the scope of the initiative. So one key thing to point out, and if you haven't noticed, the total estimated annual upkeep costs for devices that are given to students to take home is much higher. So, and that's per device too, not just because we're going to have more Chromebooks, but the cost of maintaining devices when they're given to students to take home goes up by quite a bit. So I think the figure I gave you in the last slide was $1.14 per device. We're estimating the cost to be $4.30 per device per year in a one-to-one environment. So that's about 3 times the cost for repairs. And let's see here. And then the other thing I wanted to point out about this slide, so similar to the last one, the blue highlighted values are covered by ESSER and ECF. The grand total at the bottom there, so that is the total for Chromebook repairs. There are some key things that are not included in that grand total that I will include in the upcoming slides, and I'll kind of combine everything together and break it down by funding source. But this is basically the last slide, and then I just took that exact same thing and I said, okay, what if we went one-to-one? And this is how these numbers would change. So this is sort of the first transformation of those numbers. And then the next couple slides will include the other things that aren't included already.
So I'll just point out that, between the two numbers, the 460 if we did nothing and the 643 if we go one-to-one, that's a nominal difference when you're looking at it over the course of 10 years. There's other costs that James will highlight outside of just the devices themselves that are coming up in the next couple slides.
And we're also looking at 3, if I'm reading this correctly, like 3 different funding sources. So we have the grant, we have ESSER funds, and then what the district would need to kick in.
Yep.
And these numbers are basically over a 10-year period. So it's not like we're going to be spending $600 and some thousand right now. That
Right.
number is a combination of 3 different funds that we're pulling from.
Yes, yep.
Nice.
All right, go ahead and move on here. Okay, so the next slide here. So this table gives us an itemized list of all of the purchases related to the initiative. So this, each line is each individual thing. So the first one there is, purchase ECF Chromebooks for students to use at home, district-wide. The yellow highlighted values there, those are items that were not included in the cost breakdown on the previous slide. So these are going to be the total amounts that you would add to the previous grand total to get the overall total as far as cost is concerned. And then the next slide, I will actually combine them in the chart that's on the next slide. The orange highlighted values there, those are totals that exceed the $25,000 threshold that require board approval. So I just wanted to highlight those, that way we made sure to touch those. I guess I can just briefly go over the list here. So yeah, we're hoping to get some ECF devices. We're hoping to get some additional devices. So we're hoping to get some Chromebook cases for the students. So I did pass out before the meeting began some Chromebooks with cases. I'd like to get Chromebook cases for all of the Chromebooks. It's something that the students quite frankly, will need. I know most students have backpack, but I think that students put the devices in their backpack, they throw their backpack on the ground or something, there's a bunch of books in it. It's going to be less protected than if it's in its own individual case. We haven't received all of our samples yet, but we're receiving many samples, and we'll try them on, see how they fit, see how durable they are, and get a good idea of what seems like the best option. Currently, I'm partial to the cases that are sort of one size fits all. I think there's one right there in front of you, Nancy, that basically they unzip, they flip up, they got a pouch for the charger, you can pull the charger out, plug it in. Sure. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's got the straps there, so yeah, thanks for doing that. So yeah, it's held in place by straps, and so that particular type of case will fit multiple different models of Chromebook, and so that will be useful when it comes time to replace the devices. Students can hold on to the case that they currently have, and we can just swap the device out. So we should be able to get some additional use out of those cases and replace them when necessary. The next line item is the 122 additional Chromebooks we'd like to get for going one-to-one. 266. So those are district-wide Chromebooks. So the 266 total might not necessarily just apply to the secondary level, but those are devices that need to be replaced. And then, so the next line item is hiring 3 student helpers to assist with preparing Chromebooks and upgrading technology. So this is to for us to get everything done over the summer. There's going to be quite a bit of things to do, and we're hopeful that we can get all of the equipment in for the summer, which is why, to sort of echo Adam's previous point, we're hoping to get everything approved as soon as possible. That way, once we're able to purchase the devices, we can purchase them now. Once we have received confirmation that we will receive the funds, so that way we can have the devices by the summer, so then we can get everything installed over the summer. The next line item is hiring a full-time Tier 1 technology technician for repairing Chromebooks in-house. So the idea with bringing on additional technology technician Tier 1 is for us to be able to expedite the repair process, to take some of the additional legwork that would be required if we were to go with a solution that there are companies that provide repair services that you can ship the Chromebook to. They will repair them and they'll ship them back. You still have to have somebody actually reach out to the company, say what's wrong, put a ticket in, package the device up, drop it off to FedEx, UPS, what have you. The device gets shipped out, gets shipped back, then they have to redistribute the device to the student. I would like for us to have a more expedited process where we have an extra cart of Chromebooks at each building, and if a student breaks a device, if they're not somebody who's repeatedly breaking their device and there's a reason why we might want to say, hey, hold on a second, we're not going to give you a device right this second, we got to contact your parent or something to that effect. In a normal circumstance, if a device breaks, a student can just get another device right then and there, and they can keep going, keep using the device. There are plenty of times where there are issues with Chromebooks, and it's not the student's fault. Chromebooks, they are relatively affordable devices, and so just like any technology, piece of technology, they break on their own. So in those circumstances, we don't want to keep the students waiting when they get them a device and get them back up and running as soon as possible. The other added benefit of having an additional person on staff is that they can do things that aren't repairing Chromebooks. So there's plenty of other things to do, technology related, especially with heightening concerns around cybersecurity and the additional need for implementing cybersecurity measures. Having additional staff in our department will allow us to focus on other things that are required of us. So.
No doubt that more people are needed for technology.
And then so the next line item there is just an estimate on what it would cost to repair the devices for the first 2 years. We applied for ESSER funding for those two first 2 years. It'd be nice to have some parts on hand, so that way, even though we're going to give the students devices immediately, so that way they can keep their Chromebook and they can keep moving, having parts on hand will allow us to then immediately fix that device. That way it's ready to go to be given to somebody else if it needs to. And so I'd really like for us to have a streamlined repair process. And so getting some parts that we can have in stock ready to go will be helpful. Next two line items are the asset management software that I'd like to purchase. It's a plugin for PowerSchool. It's what we currently use for students and staff that's our student information system, so grading, attendance, et cetera, et cetera. It's a plug-in, so it'll allow us to have all of the information in one location, so that way when it comes time to look for, who had this device, or how many times was this device broken, or how much does this student owe us for, assuming we even want to charge them, which is something that we have to think about. We can get the answers to those questions and have everything in one spot. So it'll be very useful to have that. And then the final line item there is, so that's in the summer of 2024. So that is just something to look at for the future. We'll need to purchase 270 Chromebooks to replace devices that we currently have that are in need of replacement. So they will be reaching the 5-year replacement window in 2024. Okay, so this is the slide that kind of brings everything together. It's the all-encompassing cost projection of each scenario broken down by funding source. So the top chart there is the first slide where I looked at the costs if we just kept things as they were. We didn't actually purchase additional devices to give to students to take home. But we are planning to replace devices every 5 years because we have to. So that's what that first chart breaks down. I guess I'll just point out here. So, the way it's written there, 2022, 23. So ECF, $67,500 plus the $45,250 for ESSER, and then $0 for district funds, and then we add all three of those together to get the total spending. So each year's total spending is there at the bottom, and so those three, ESSER, ECF, and district funds, those are how each year's total spending is distributed between those three funding sources.
So the key point here is the board approval of the concept implies that we would be allocating operating dollars after ESSER and the ECF grant are gone over the next 10 years to continue this. And this has been, we've had other times in the past where we've had the opportunity to move to one-to-one, and we've not gone there because of concerns over sustainability. So there's always a bit of risk with moving forward with a long-term commitment, but for the reasons that were outlined at the beginning of the presentation, this is just a required tool for how students learn. Right? You can imagine going to a university when our kids graduate without a mobile device. So that, combined with all the other reasons we've outlined before, is why we're recommending this long-term commitment to this concept at the secondary buildings.
And I like the idea that this is planned out in the thought process, because this is something that we can budget for the next 10 years.
Yeah. I was
And
gonna
a lot
say
of
that.
districts are, I feel like we're a little behind, because a lot of districts, right off the bat, send their kids home with devices. So,
Well, that's
being
what
able
I
to
didn't know,
budget this.
has this been through finance, or, I'm sure you probably, Sarah, looked over it.
Yeah.
Like when I was looking, as I couldn't, but it is, it would be spending 800,000 over the next 10 years of district funds. So we would,
Yes.
need to,
We already have a chunk of funds allocated to replacing devices, so this will just be adding a bit more to that. Of course, we'll evaluate each year,
Yeah.
to see where we're at and make sure we can budget for this properly, but we should.
but if you look on this page here, the district funds and that one-to-one cost projection,
Mhm.
like 104,000, 63, 68, 68, 186. I mean, I feel like that's not a huge.
Well, I feel that 62,000 is the employee, right?
Yes.
So it would be 62,000 as the employee, so the 13,768 is what's paid for like upkeep, things like that.
Right.
So really, the big
Yes.
chunk of that, 600,000 is the employee for 10 years.
Correct. I'm
Exactly.
just looking at where it's budgeted here.
Yeah,
Yep.
So regardless, we know what we need to budget
Mhm.
for. and we'll get through
When we're
that.
looking at 26, 27, and 27, 28, talk to me
Yep.
about the difference there, because when we're looking at other years, I mean, I could see the 5-year projections, but those 2 years back to back are 2 big years
Yep.
of expenses versus
It's
the
COVID.
every 5.
Yep.
That's
It
your
is
COVID
COVID.
bubble.
Yep.
I was gonna say, that's purchasing only, that,
Yeah.
right, that's replacing
That's the
1,056,
Yeah.
We-
doing all the
Okay.
replacement.
Okay.
We got 400 Samsung Chromebooks due to COVID. That's for replacing those
So
400
that's replacing
Samsung.
those.
Mhm.
The
Okay.
first,
Every
yeah, the first set
Yeah.
there, and then the second set is gonna be for replacing the initiative devices. So
Okay,
it's gonna be a pretty big number both years.
yeah.
And see, that was our issue in previous opportunities to go on the one, is that we could have gone out all at once and bought, several hundred devices, but then when you do 5 years later, right, when that initial funding source is gone, you'll see a lot of districts, when they go for a bond, right, they'll go 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or whatever they want to do and be real ambitious, but when the bond money's spent, what are you going to do to replace all those devices in 5 years, right?
Right.
So, in a way of looking at it, this has kind of worked out to our advantage in that we've made incremental purchases of devices over the last 5 to 6 years. And so, with the exception of the COVID bubble, it's generally dispersed rather equitably over the next decade versus just buying them all at once like is typically the case.
And James, we really appreciate seeing the projections like this because we haven't had anything like this before when we talk about technology. We have this for buses now, and it's just really nice that we can see, okay, this is where our money is in this year, and this is what it's going to look like 10 years down the road. It's really helpful in our decision making.
Awesome. I'm glad to help with that. Yeah. One thing I did, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to point out while I was looking up there at the numbers, the 23, 24 value in the top there, it says the total spending is 775, but the ESSER is this. The reason why that's there is the repair costs this year are going to be less. So this is the 4,250. This is one of the 2 repair years. The reason why that looks funky is just we're going to be getting more money from ESSER than we'll need for repairs. So this is the total amount that we'll actually need, and we'll be getting more than we need from ESSER for repairs if we don't go to 1-to-1. So that's why that's like that. It's just if somebody sees that and they're like, why is that like that? I just wanted to point it out since I noticed it. But all of the other totals seem to be adding up properly. So yeah.
So then I moved on to this recommendation slide, and there's like the 4 approval of different monies because they're from different sites.
Yep.
So that's what we would be voting on, those 4 things 2 weeks from now.
So I do think we have formal memos that we've provided with the board book, and I think that is it correct, Adam, that they would approve the
so
memos?
there's memos that break down, and they're actually
Yeah.
separate discussion items, the costs. The exception is the approval of the overall concept, right? So, because most of those memos are talking about purchases that would be made for next year. What the 1-to-1 initiative is looking for you to approve next month is really that commitment to that 10 years, right? I mean, obviously, we know things change, but it's the idea that this is going to be a long-term sustained initiative for the district that will go on with residual costs outside of the upfront costs that are outlined in the memos.
Are there any other questions for James, or Adam, or
Questions
anybody?
or discussion slide here?
No, thank you so much,
No,
James.
this
This
is
is
great.
very,
Thank you, James.
presented very well, thank you.
Yes, thank
You're
you.
welcome. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is this the next technology purchases?
Yeah, you want to run through those?
quickly?
So some of these things are connected to what James has talked about, for example, the Chromebooks and the covers. Others are just part of the normal annual replacement that the board approves from the technology department for existing technology. So just quickly, James covered Chromebooks and covers. Document cameras. So this is something that we're going to be able to do this year utilizing ESSER $3 for the most part, with some exceptions when individual cameras has failed. The last time we replaced our document cameras was with the bond from mid-2000, like 6, 7, right? So that's when most of those purchases were made. So our document cameras are getting to the point where they need to be replaced. And in lieu of a millage or a bond, we can utilize ESSER $3 to do that. So that was the intent with that piece. iPads, just like Chromebooks, they come up on their useful lifespan and need to be replaced periodically. And so the iPads, which are utilized across the district, more predominantly for student use in the lower elementary, those also have an opportunity to be replaced this coming year. Desktop computers, you see that every year, just as part of the annual rotation plan for the PCs across the district. They run on a 5-year rotation. So in a nutshell, those are the technology-related memos. And again, just going back to the same idea, the concept is if the board approves those on the 21st, then when that rent-seat pricing becomes available in April, all these things can get ordered right away, which increases the likeliness that we'll have those available to install over the summer.
Are there any questions for Adam or James on any of those purchases? Okay.
No?
Staff appreciation.
Yeah, just quickly on that, in addition to doing a lunch, which is, we would most likely delegate out to our food service department, we're looking at doing something in addition to that this year. So we've reached out in different ways to staff to see what they might be interested in. So they're kind of having those conversations, and I'm hoping to be able to come back to you in the second meeting in March with a plan for what we're going to end up doing. But I got some initial feedback today from staff, which I appreciated in terms of what they might be looking for, and I'll solidify those ideas and get them to you on the 21st. At least that's what I'm aiming for.
Okay. And when we do this luncheon, can we make sure that every building does it during teacher appreciation? I think that caused a little bit of confusion at one of our buildings, that we did it later at the end of May. If we can do it actually during the week.
Yeah, I think maybe this year I'll just tell them when they're going to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
We got a little bit too complicated last year, I think.
It
But
did,
yeah, but we'll work on that piece, and then like I said, we're in a good spot this year where we're looking to be able to do something on top of that to recognize our staff, and I'll solidify those details for you here, hopefully in the next couple weeks.
Okay. Has the food service agreement?
It's basically the same agreement we had with Hazlitt since last year. This provides Jim and his oversight, Davis and his oversight of the food service department. Otherwise, there's really nothing that's notably different from the structure we put in place already. Just a reminder that this was something we had to kind of put together rather quickly. Hazlitt was a great partner and willing to collaborate with us, and Jim's done an excellent job in his capacity serving both districts.
Any questions on that? Okay. Next, board policy. Sarah or Adam, who would like to?
Well, does anyone have any questions, first of all, about any of them before I jump into? Okay, I think that.
I think they were.
Okay. I think that 7110, which was basic program, is now the co-curricular activities. That was the one that had a lot of significant changes. A lot of it was just, some terminology was a little antiquated, and so going through and polishing it up a little bit and taking away. And also, I did note during my report that some of these policies are also indicated in other policies, so they've been merged over the place. Any questions? Adam, do you have anything else?
I'll just touch on 7120, which we reworked to be reflective of the district and school improvement plan, which is also required. They give you a menu of options, but it's also required under law. So we retooled that policy to be more reflective of current practice and current law. And as you know, that's how we kind of do business here, right? I mean, the board establishes its board goals, the district develops a district improvement plan based on your board goals, and then the schools base their school improvement plan on both of those documents, right? And then we have an evaluation system that holds everybody accountable for having those things accomplished. So I think that policy is just more reflective of what our actual practice is and up to date with current law as well.
Oh, good.
Any other questions, any other things? Again, I like how these are laid out when we get these and what's like taken out and what's like changed. It makes it really easy to review them.
I just also wanted to go back, sorry, one quick thing too. I know Sarah talked about the co-curricular activities 7110. Yeah, this is something that I know some board members have inquired to in the past, and I just want to make sure we tried to make this more clear. This also encapsulates the process for how board-sponsored or board-approved activities and clubs get approved. So I know there's been some question about that. And remember, there's two distinct tracks that can be taken, right? One is board-sponsored, so that means we're paying for it, right? We're paying an advisor, a coach, faculty advisor, et cetera, as well as supporting all the other aspects of the team, to include transportation when we have those assets. And then there's board recognized, which is not, we don't pay for it, but we allow them to utilize our facilities free of charge. They can use our logo and say they're the Williamston, whatever team it might be or group it might be. So you have these two different tracks, but both of them end up going through the administration and then end up at the board level for approval. So since that's come up from time to time, I just wanted to make sure that I noted that this is the policy that pertains to that topic.
Any other questions for Adam or Sarah or anyone else on that board? Okay, we'll move those forward. The next is talking about the Jeff's seat. So I just want to kind of review to make sure everybody knows the process. This isn't the first time we've had to fill a seat, and everything that we've done or that we'll do is a process that has been used in the past. So we put the posting out. Individuals had a week to submit their letter of intent and what makes them a good candidate. As you can see in the package you received today, some people did that in different ways. One wasn't right or wrong, it's just how they submitted it. We didn't put any type of restrictions on that. Then on Friday, questions were sent to them and they had to return them by Sunday at midnight. Once all of that process was done, we had 8 candidates that met the timelines. Again, some people turned in extra pieces in their packet. It was not required, so it can't necessarily be used against anybody else. The only things we required is a letter of intent and the answer of those questions. So any of those other extra things were not required materials. The next process is what is the next step in this process? And this is what, instead of just making this decision by myself, I'd like to get some input of what you guys are thinking. I feel like we have 3 options. Either we interview them all, or we take all of the information that we have, the packets and the information that we have, and we rank them. So your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth choice. We do that individually. We send that off to Betsy. Betsy will then assign each one a number. So your first choice would get 8 points, your second choice would get 7, your third choice would get 6, and on down. She'll compile that, and then the top 3 or 4 candidates will interview. The third option is we could get a committee together, an adjunct committee I could assign that can go over the applications and then come up with 3 or 4 individuals to interview. So I don't we've done all of those things in the past. None of them are new. I can't think of another situation that we could use to do this. We are on a short timeline. We have this week and next week to be able to get someone into that slot. I know a Google Doc was sent. It looks like everyone was available Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. Depending on what we do, we might need to do some extra things this week. So thoughts on what people would like to do, or how we'd like to move forward. Or would you like me to just pick one?
If we do the interview, I mean, is that as an open meeting? Where
Yes,
people
all
will
of
watch,
it.
will
Right,
see the
yeah.
interview?
Mhm.
I mean, it would not be streamed on YouTube. It's like, would be considered a committee meeting, which
So,
we don't typically do those. But they are open. I mean, all of them are. So even if we got a committee together to review the applications, that would be open. I mean, people could come to that if they wanted. It has to be posted? I don't know if it has to be
Yes,
posted.
it does.
It has to be posted, so it would be open.
Depending on what we do decide, there was one candidate that did say that he was not available next week at all.
Correct. He's not available on the week of the 14th when we were kind of planning out to do interviews. I was going to reach out and let Adam or Betsy know. I was going to reach out to MASB and see if we could do his interview, because it is an interview like over, he said he would be available if we wanted to do it over Skype or something. I know we can't do that, but I don't know if we could do it over like a, what do I want to say, like a call, like if he called in. I don't know if that's an option. Again, we'd have to see, is he someone that we want to interview, and if he is, then we might have to, and if we're looking at interviews and we have availability this week, do we interview the candidates this week and then have our discussion next week? So I guess first I need to know what kind of things are you thinking? What would you like to do to move process in this? I guess I can give my personal opinion. I feel like 8 candidates is a lot to interview. We haven't usually interviewed that many. If we have like 5 or 6, I think we've gone forward and interviewed them all. We might have to break that up if we're doing all 8. So, you know, I just think that's a lot of, we typically have not interviewed that many candidates in the past.
Because typically the interviews run about 20 to 30 minutes apiece.
Correct.
So, I mean,
So we'd be talking 4 hours.
you're talking about 4 hours.
And plus deliberation.
And the deliberation is in public.
Right, everything is.
Everything is in public.
I guess my inclination would be ranked choice, pulling the top 3 or 4 people.
And send it to Betsy.
Seems most efficient, given the time constraints.
I'm fine with that.
I would agree with that.
I would be fine doing that and do like top 4.
Do 4 candidates.
That's
That's-
50%,
that's
that's
half.
kind of like 50% of them.
Yeah, 4.
Seems reasonable.
So if we do this, I mean, we do have the one candidate who can't meet. So I guess I'll have to then, we'll have to see if he comes out and then what we do with that,
Mhm.
how we do that.
Yeah.
So Betsy, how quick, so, because then we have to set up interviews, and to be fair, can we all read our information? I can reach out to Amanda, and can we get that to Betsy by tomorrow at noon? Could we do earlier, as noon?
I can do
I could do that.
How do we rank them?
So you're gonna rank, so the
can't
top, so you're gonna rank them 1, so the only thing you
Is that
have to
1
do
to-
about 1 to 8. So and your number 1 is going to be like your top choice, I want to interview them candidate.
So we would send Betsy number 1, Jane Doe, number 2, John Smith.
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera.
So you need to send Betsy your number 1. So again, number 1 is gonna be your top candidate, and they go down. And then number 9 is gonna be your,
So the person with the least amount of points, the 4 with the least? Is that how it is? Number 8?
Well, I'm actually gonna, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
If you wanna turn that around and give your highest person the number 8, because that's what I'm going to do. I would just so again, you're all doing the same thing. The highest ranked person that you think is most qualified, give that person a number 8.
The most points.
And then go down, and I'll
So
just make it.
opposite.
Yeah, just opposite, because I'm going to come back to you hopefully with
Right,
the
you'll come
4
back to,
people with the most points.
right, in the top 4.
Yep.
And we don't need how many points or who got what, we just need the top 4. Here are the top 4 candidates, and you don't even have to, I guess I would appreciate you when you send them out, not even telling us, like,
Sure.
this one was 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, just,
Okay.
here are the 4 candidates we're interviewing, period, that's where
Okay.
we're gonna go. So again, okay, so do we all understand? Number 1 will get 8 points. Yes, I'm saying it right? Your number 1 is
Yes.
gonna get 8
Yes.
points.
You are.
Your last one, your number 8 is gonna get 1 point. Okay, get that to Betsy by, tomorrow at noon. She'll calculate that, and then we'll have our 4 candidates that we interview, and then we'll have to move into next steps.
Betsy, when do you think you'll have that in our inbox? Tomorrow morning?
As soon as I do math. Can I-
Okay.
Can I, if you get it to me by noon, I'll get it to you back by 1 o'clock.
Right, so
Get
my
that
only,
calculator going.
yeah,
I have a
so,
new adding machine.
and again, the 4 candidates, she can let us know.
No, I just mean, when will we get the actual document to send back to you?
No,
Oh,
Chris,
she's
you're
not
just
signing
gonna email her.
Oh, we're just emailing you?
You're
Okay.
gonna email her your
Okay.
your list of candidates.
Okay,
and
I didn't know if she was gonna do like just a Google form.
No.
But that
Okay.
takes more time.
Yes,
Okay.
no,
That's fine.
nope. Just email her your candidates, and when you put them on your thing.
I got it.
Candidate 1, return, candidate 2, candidate 3, that first candidate, she's gonna
Yep.
give 8 points to. Everybody be on the same page with that.
That's fine.
And then, when she lets us know who those 4 candidates are, please remember that is still gonna be confidential, because we then need to get letters out to the 4 that we're not interviewing, and then we need to schedule them. So that will not be up for public knowledge, I don't believe, at that moment, because we still then have to get the other stuff together.
Should we talk through the process after the interview to say how we are going to determine from those 4 who that number 1 person is? Because we've done that a number of ways too.
We have, and I've been very vocal about this. I know MESB likes give everybody a number, and then whoever has the top number gets it. I'm okay doing that after we have discussions about them. I think we miss a key component of what we liked about the candidates when we just jump to who's your favorite. And then we're not having discussion of, I liked that this person said this, I feel like they missed the boat on not expanding on this. So I would prefer to have that discussion, and then if we need to go to some ranking system, we can do that. I'm open to how, if people want to do other things.
I like that idea.
It's
At
fine.
least having a discussion about them. What else? Do we, and then I guess, also be looking for the possibility of, I guess, a Google calendar, or not Google, I don't know, Doodle, whatever those calendar things are, in case we have to do something this week. I'm sorry, Adam, I know, but we hate that, but if we gotta figure out what we can do with a candidate, if we choose a candidate that can come in on our timeline. So, I don't know what that will look like, or if we need to do anything, but let's see. Okay, any questions, any thoughts, anything about that? The next thing, extended leave request for Haley Hodges. Adam, do you have anything you want to add to this, or just it's an extended maternity leave coming
Yeah,
back?
Kaylee's just asked for an unpaid extension of 1 month, and then she'll return on May 2nd to her classroom. Pam Ostrander has been the long-term sub and
And
has
she
done
can
a
stay?
great, yes, she can stay through May 2nd, so that'll be a nice transition point, and the students will be able to end the year with their original teacher. But Pam's done a great job, and so, as she always does, and so consequently, I feel comfortable extending this out another month.
Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, concerns? Because this is an employee issue, I guess if you do, make sure to have that with Adam before we vote on this next week. Next, our HVAC system upgrade.
Yeah, so I'll try to synthesize this as much as I can. We did an investment grade audit of our HVAC system throughout the district, and this went back to fall of 2020. So this has been a long time in coming. The results of that audit came back very positive across the board. But it did identify specifically aging equipment in the district that needs to be upgraded. And that was actually in keeping with what we had kind of assessed internally in terms of the prioritization of what HVAC upgrades need to be done first. So based on the results of that discussion that had already taken place with the Finance and Facilities Committee, we pushed forward with bids, and no surprise, bids came back at more than what our consultant had initially anticipated, but sign of the times, right? So we actually had recommended 3 different projects that were being completed using ESSER $2. Now remember, this is separate from ESSER 3, which was part of the one-to-one initiative. Unfortunately, due to the amount of money the bids came back at, we're not able to use ESSER $2 to fund all 3 of those. But we are able to recommend 2 of those. And so the first one is actually here at the middle school, and this is going to be a complete replacement of the boilers, essentially the heating system for the building. It's currently running on 5 boilers. One of those is down, so we're actually running a boiler short. It's a very old system and needs to be replaced, and so by leveraging ESSER $2 to make that replacement over the summer, that's something that we can get done and actually utilize our sinking fund to accomplish other tasks that also need to be, other facility needs that also need to be addressed. So that's the first major project. That's the bulk of the cost. That's a major. It's also a major initiative. It's also going to replace the supply and return fan motors up on the roof here, and then connect all that into the existing automation system. The second project is to install air conditioning and a new heating system in the gym at Explorer. That is the only part of our facility that does not have air conditioning. And so you can imagine with the security issues, with keeping the doors closed, the fact that that doesn't have windows, it gets pretty hot in there. And so poor Mr. Plaxton's been a trooper and taught in that gym for many, many years. But this upgrade here would allow us to install air conditioning in that facility, and then all of our classroom spaces throughout the district would have that, plus the upgraded heating system that would be tied into that. So minus the engineering costs, project management fees, and some of the automation expenses, all of this project at $643,000 would be covered by ESSER 2, but that would essentially be the balance of our ESSER $2. So that's a summary of the proposal.
And then timeline with this, I know it says current lead time equipment varies 10 to 12 weeks. Is this something that will be done like as soon as we approve it, or like have to be done over the summer, or are we looking fall, like what?
Yeah, so there's a summary of the lead times somewhere in the packet, but I think they're looking at approximately 20 weeks to get, here it is. So
Last page.
Yeah, last page. So the pumps are 20 weeks, boilers are 10 to 12 weeks, and the carrier RTU is 20 weeks, although I can't remember off the top of my head what that is. Oh, that's for the Explorer gym. So that's going to put us in July. So yeah, that's going to be kind of a pressing matter to try to get this done as quickly as possible so the items can be ordered. If you're agreeable to this in principle tonight, then what we'll probably do is sign a letter of intent. It's not a formal approval or allocation of funds, but what that'll do is it'll get our name in the lineup. And then if you formally approve on the 21st, then we'll know that the funds have been released to be applied to the 2 projects. If worst case scenario, if this wasn't able to take place next summer, I think there's still ways that we could work around this, right? We don't need the boilers right at the beginning of the school year. So we could potentially, depending on the availability of the contractor structure, this work could take place during the school year as well. But ideally, it'd be nice to have both these projects completed over the summer.
So does anybody have any questions or any issues, at least getting us, it's not a formal vote, we don't need to set aside the rules?
No, we're not
but
asking
just
for
kinda
that.
give him,
If there were strong objections tonight, that would be one thing, but if everyone seems agreeable, I mean, you don't need to vote by any means, but if there's no strong objections, what we'll
we
do
can
is,
get our name on the
right,
top.
we'll issue a letter of intent tomorrow, it just puts our name in the lineup, and then again, once you formally approved it, then we can actually release the funds. So, that's kind of where we're at this point. And again, it's just a matter of timing and trying to get the equipment in before somebody else cuts in front of us.
Right. Do we have any strong objections to doing, getting it in there? All right, get our name on a list. Sorry. Next thing, we're up to action items. Can I get a motion to the approval of our consent calendar?
Make a motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the minutes for the regular meeting held on February 7th, 2022, and the Committee of the Whole meeting as presented.
Second.
Second is Dave. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we do not have any roll call item votes. We do have a separate action item to approve the purchase of the DBQ project. Do I have a motion?
Motion that the Williamston Board of Education approve the purchase of DBQ Project Supplemental High School Social Studies Curriculum.
Second?
Any other discussion, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next, we do have some correspondence, a retirement letter, and Jeff's letter.
Yeah, is it okay if I jump in?
Yep, absolutely.
I just wanted to, just quick notice, a notification to the board about Steve Tice. He's been a part of the district for a long, long time. In fact, he
35
retired as a
years.
member of our maintenance team and then came back and has worked for us as a third-party contractor, I think, for almost the last decade. So just one of those people behind the scenes, doesn't get a lot of face time with the board. But it's the reason that, the snow is plowed, the grass is cut, the boilers are working, we have air conditioning, I mean, all those types of things, right? Just very involved, can-do attitude, and has been an invaluable part of our team for a long time. So I just wanted to make sure, he got a little bit of summary of his due, and we'll try to get him back to whatever retirement gig we come up with later this year for our retirees. But invaluable contributor to the district for decades.
Yes, 35 years, wow. Next, we do have Jeff's resignation, and I just want to say, I'm not sure if Jeff is watching, I think
I'm
he
sure
is.
he is.
He did text me earlier and wanted me to thank Adam for the nice, kind words. Jeff and I have been on this board a really long time together, and this was kind of a I knew that this was possibly coming, but he really believed he had another year. So it was kind of a punch in the gut a little bit, kind of a surprise. Jeff and I kind of have that husband-wife board relationship, a love-hate relationship, I'm sure at times, but his heart is always in the right place, always. He would give you the shirt off his back if you asked, and I know he has offered to, when he knows Mike is gone, to, do whatever I need. So he is a really good guy, and he will be missed on this board greatly by me.
And we'll get Jeff his placard and some other
Yes, I
things
was
in
gonna say,
spring in
we
terms of
will have-
recognition, just once we have a little more time to process and respond, so.
Maybe he can come back and we can do a goodbye
Yep.
for him. This is the second part of our citizen comment. I don't think we have any citizens in the office, I can't see. Second, board reports. I do, one thing I do want to say also about our music program. They went to festival last week, received ones, I know our 7th grade did. I'm not sure about our 8th grade. I know our high school received ones. This, for some of you who don't know music festival, this festival is kind of like a sports district or regionals or leagues or whatever you put it in that category. Lynn Kelsey has gotten ones with this high school band since she's been here, which is pretty outstanding, and she gets recognized for that. I've had the privilege of going to listen, and the judges think so incredibly highly of her, and it's just pretty outstanding, because I feel like she is pretty, she doesn't toot her own horn ever, and those kids do not want to disappoint her, so it's a lot of stress, and they work really, really hard. So if you have a chance, I do know it's like somewhere out there on social media, and it was just with COVID and how they had to learn last year and what they were doing this year, it just is pretty exceptional. Also pretty exciting, I couldn't attend the girls' basketball. I do think I saw Pete Cool dyed his hair, was told the girls, he made a bet that if he won, he would dye
Oh
his
my
hair
Lord, did
blonde.
you really dye it?
Yeah,
He
you
dyed
went
it
there.
blonde. He should have dyed his, like, he's blonde. Like, it's like white, blonde, yellow, orange kind of a color, but that's pretty exceptional for them. And then I think the boys play, our boys team undefeated right now. All of these sports things in extracurricular and all of this with COVID, it's just pretty exciting to see our students supporting each other at all of these events. That's pretty exceptional. Anybody else? Anything else?
To go along with that, the evening of jazz is coming up at
Yes,
the high school
right now.
does. And if you recall, this was right before COVID, the board donated some gift cards. And those gift cards are now in for the auction this year because they haven't done it for the last 2 years. So they're still good, and you are able to bid on them, and it'll be a great night.
Yeah, and you can bid, you can bid online. I would suggest some of you, if you haven't gone to look at the stuff, they are stepping up their game. Like, there is some really big baskets of pretty exciting stuff, so.
Stay away from the car wash.
Oh, my Lord.
Adam's gonna take.
I know what we're giving Adam for his
I
birthday
know, I was
next,
just
like,
thinking, like, he's mentioned that like 5 times.
he's gonna have Eagle Car Wash for the rest of his life.
I feel like your car doesn't even get that dirty. Like,
No, because he gets a car wash every week.
Apparently. Oh my goodness, anything else? Okay, I will take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second? Or do I have a second? Sorry, I'm
Second.
not. Chris and Sarah, any discussion? All right, we're all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.